Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who video where we are reviewing, discussing, breaking down all things the Halloween apocalypse after the first episode aired last night. So yes, it's the return of Doctor Who after nearly a year. We start with Doctor Who Flux, this new 6-part story. I think it's fair to say that it was quite different to maybe what we were expecting and what we're used to from Doctor Who. Just in terms of the format of it, obviously it's the first of a 6-part story essentially, rather than what we're used to more, previously of Monster of the Week, Story of the Week type stories with some sort of arc, but not so much of it. So it's very different, and I felt like I actually made a load of notes about this episode, which I don't always do before reviews, because I felt like it was just necessary to be able to keep across everything that actually happened and be able to kind of recount for you guys and discuss exactly what's going on. I thought the first thing I'd do was as I went through, I noted down each of the different plots, because obviously one of the key things that's very different about this story, this episode, the Halloween apocalypse, is that it introduces many different kind of what plots that were going to be explored is somewhat in this episode, but also in future episodes. There's loads of them thrown into this story, lots of them which aren't really explored a lot yet, which is kind of just the nature of setting up a story in this way to spread it over 6 episodes. And so I felt it was necessary to kind of note down what each of these are so I can actually kind of remind you of them, discuss them, give you guys a note of it. So probably just one terrible handwriting that you can see here. There are, I counted 12 different plots sort of opened in this story. 2 of them or so are closed off as well, but there's a hecking lot in there. So it's going to be a lot to pick apart. I'm going to try my best to do this in less than, half an hour. But I think there's just a lot to discuss. So quickly before I get started, guys, please do hit that like button. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button for lots of Doctor Who discussion over the next few weeks. Well, always, all year round on my channel, but particularly over the next few weeks, I'm going to be virtually daily videos. Not every single day all the time, but certainly there'll be lots of videos about the series. Lots of info for you guys to find out and get the lowdown on. Plus, of course, there's reactions all the time. If you haven't already, please do check out me and Megan's reaction to the Halloween apocalypse. It was a really fun video to record. Sorry it took so long to get it together. The copyright issues have just been an absolute nightmare. But yeah, without further ado, let's get past the plugs and let's get cracking with the start of the episode. So I thought the most simple way to do this would be to go fairly chronologically through the episode and kind of break down each section of it as we go through it, because it's just kind of the way I think it lends it to. So we get the opening pre-title sequence, which firstly, it's nice to have a pre-title sequence rather than just start with the titles, which I just think doesn't engage people in the same way as, an action-packed. Yeah, sure, it was a bit of a slightly over-the-top, cheesy opening scene, classic action scene Doctor Who. But it worked. It got you engaged, it got you excited. I felt like it was great that they were throwing us straight into the action rather than really, what's so often been a problem during the Chibnall era of just having such slow pacing and lots of exposition dumping, not actually showing stuff happening and just building up to nothingness to some extent. And so I was pleased that we didn't end up doing that in this story. They threw us straight into the middle of it, that we've already done all the Doctor meets Carvinista and, has a little chin wag and then they try and escape. We've done all that once already, so we don't kind of have to deal with all that and the mystery of who is, finding out more about Carvinista and whatever. We can kind of just jump into the story, and I think that worked really, really effectively. The only criticism I have of the first scene is I felt like the CGI wasn't brilliant. Like, in general, I thought the effects on this episode were amazing. Like, this whole stuff with the Flux, which obviously we'll come on to, but the visuals of the Flux were absolutely incredible. But this was just the one scene, this opening scene, where I felt like I could see they were, hanging off a bar in front of a green screen. Like, it felt fairly apparent that's what they were doing. And, yeah, it's the nature of it. I'm not going to criticise them because, I don't think that dodgy special effects brings Doctor Who down. That's just the nature of Doctor Who sometimes. But it was just something that I observed. So yes, we get that opening scene, we get introduced to what I'm going to call Plot 1. I just numbered them as we went through, but we're going to call it Plot 1, which was the kind of Doctor versus Carvinista plot that's mostly wrapped up in this story, but, we'll explore it more. Then we have the titles, and then we go into Plot number 2, which is this whole Liverpool 1820 thing. Now, this is probably, of all the plots, this is probably the one plot that I don't quite understand why they dumped it in this episode. Why this couldn't have been slotted in the beginning of episode 2, or whatever episode is actually going to focus on this storyline, because seemingly some tunnels being built 201 years ago in Liverpool in the underground doesn't seem to have any obvious relevance to any of the other plots we've had so far. I'm sure it will. I saw somebody theorise, could it be that Claire, who we'll talk about later in the Weeping Angel plot, has she been sent back in time to the time of Liverpool 1820 and somehow gets involved in that storyline? I don't know. It's just a theory. And sure, like, it was fairly interesting and mysterious. I noted down that the character Williamson, he seemed to kind of, he was talking about, things being cataclysmic and impossible and whatever. And it sort of almost felt like he was describing the Flux in some way. So I don't know if this chap Williamson, who I think was like some great inventor of these or designed and built these underground tunnels back in Liverpool in the 1800s. And I feel like people don't quite know why he built them. I think was kind of something I was reading about it. So that's quite interesting. And I don't know, he just seems a bit of an interesting character who maybe is going to have some, prophecy or weird, psychic knowledge or something. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But this felt like the one plot that, as interesting as it was for the couple of minutes we had it, I also felt like it didn't really need to be in there, and that we could have just launched out of the titles straight into Liverpool present day, into John Bishop in the museum. I feel like we could have saved that scene for another episode. So yes, we do get introduced to the character of Dan Lewis, played by John Bishop, who I actually quite enjoyed in this story. I really wasn't sure what to expect going into it, but actually I felt like he slotted really nicely into the story. He really just his character, it was quite easy to warm to him as a character, I think. Obviously there was a little bit of comedy in there, but he clearly wasn't trying to just, be a comedian. So I think that was a real, like, helpful point in just making his character more easy to connect with straight away. And just the fact that he wasn't, like, also a dumb character. I don't know. I just particularly noticed it, like, in the scene when he's trapped in the cage and talking to Carvinista. Like, he doesn't seem phased by anything. He doesn't seem, slow, scared, screaming. He's just like, what are you talking about, mate? Like, clearly, if you could have killed me, you would have by now. So clearly, you can't, or you're not going to. And I appreciated that kind of intelligence that he brought from his character. I think that was really nice as well. And I just think that he, was a really warm presence on screen. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, because I feel like we kind of, we got introduced to him, but I don't really feel like we've got that much of him yet, that much of his character. That's just because there was so much in this episode. And, he kind of almost accidentally joined the TARDIS team at the end of the episode, and we haven't really had that kind of initial exploration of his character. He hasn't even really had a conversation with the Doctor properly yet, apart from in Chaos in the TARDIS. So, yeah, based on this first episode, I feel like I like him. I'm happy. It's good, but I feel like, we're going to need a lot more to kind of warm to him more so. Alongside Dan, we in that scene in Set in Liverpool, we also meet the character of Di, who's an actual person who works at this museum, and is also a seemingly sort of awkward love interest for Dan. And there's a sort of slightly awkward, nice romance plot going on there that they're going to go on a date on Halloween, and obviously it all goes wrong, as we'll cover in plot. I think what becomes plot 12 in this story. But yeah, she's also another character introduced there who I think is going to be relevant later in the series as well. Kind of running in the background along a lot of this is what I'm calling plot 4, and this is the TARDIS problems. You have the leaking TARDIS, you have the TARDIS not quite going where it's supposed to, you have the sort of red alert moment where the TARDIS stops working until they bash it. You've got I love the visual iconography of the TARDIS doors on the floor inside the TARDIS. Like, it's just brilliant. I love that stuff. It's so cool. It just kind of, screws with you, but it's so clever. And fun, and it reminds me of Logopolis, where you end up with the Doctor's TARDIS exterior inside the interior, and it gets really heckin' confusing. I mean, Logopolis is just a confusing story anyway. Christopher Hamilton Bidmead. But yeah, I just love the way they did this in this story, and I'm looking forward to sort of understanding more about why the TARDIS is having these problems. Is it just down to the Flux messing with time and the universe and everything? Or is it something to do with, I don't know, another Doctor and another TARDIS? Something to do with the Division, which obviously we're going to explore a lot more of in a minute as well. I don't know, there was just a lot of different stuff in there that could be why the TARDIS is having its problems, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. So the next plot number 5, one of the most mysterious plots, but one that I'm sure is going to, become more and more expanded through the series, was the plot of Swarm, this character who we first meet kind of contained inside this sort of chamber that these two guards, I guess you'd say, were coming to kind of check on him and check he's still sealed up there. They say he's been sealed there since the beginning of time, the beginning of the universe. And then we also, I kind of tweaked it during the episode based on the gun that we could see that one of them was holding, was that it looked like a gun that the Division, people of the Division used back in the previous series. In Fugitive of the Jadoon, we see Commander Gat and the Ruth Doctor have that style of gun. And then obviously we get a mention from Swarm saying thank you for your services to Division, because the sort of older of the two characters has been doing this for years and is now leaving and passing it on to the younger character. No, I can't remember their names. I'm sorry. Do they even have names? I don't know if I think one of them might be mentioned on screen, but I'm sorry. And so, yeah, it seems that these characters are in some way working for the Division, which was a surprise to me when I first watched it. I was not expecting the Division to become such a big thing so quickly in the series. Sure, it seemed fairly likely that it would be further explored given how much mystery was left surrounding it at the end of Series 12. It was very much like, oh, by the way, there's this thing called the Division. And then it cut off and you didn't know actually anything about it. And that, an organisation that is meant to kind of interfere and do stuff, but also doesn't exist. That was the idea in the pre-Hartnell Doctor days is when this is all supposedly set. And so it seems actually that Swarm and these characters have all got something to do with the Division and the past of the Doctor, which I think is going to be fascinating to see explored. And just those sort of shots, the way that these characters just disintegrate into nothingness, and then the way Swarm, his kind of face and completely changes. Those CGI effects were incredible. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And so yeah, it was a bit confusing and mysterious, this sort of scene, but I feel like it sets up, it's kind of giving us the setup for the villain escaping and becoming a big part of what's going to be the rest of this series. And it's also notable that we see this scene kind of through the Doctor's brain, basically. This mental sort of video being sent into the Doctor's brain. It's notable that Swarm mentions that he's re-establishing this psychic connection with the Doctor, which implies there's been a psychic connection in the past, which I think lends credence to what we learn later in the episode about Swarm seemingly having had a past with the Doctor that the Doctor doesn't remember. So then the next plot number 6, we're up to 6 so far, halfway there, is the Arctic Circle. Well, it's not really a plot, to be fair. It's just kind of a setting for a couple of characters, this husband and wife, I think, or, partners or whatever, that are set out in the Arctic Circle and have some sort of connection to what we learn to be the Swarm, or learn to be Swarm, because they have this mysterious floating sort of red flashing disc thing that looks very alien in their garage that suddenly starts setting off an alarm. And then this female character says that they haven't been given warning about something. It was all a bit confusing. You didn't quite know what was happening, what was the point. Obviously this ties into what becomes plot number there isn't. I've called this the plot number 12, 11. I didn't really count this as a plot, which is when Swarm turns up and kills the male character and then takes the female character and just turns her into Swarm's sister, who I believe is called Azure. Azure, I think that's what they're calling. So Swarm and Azure are these two, what we believe are the Ravagers. I think they're the Ravagers, although it's not been made completely clear yet. They haven't been explicitly stated, but the implication seems to be that they are. And they appear to be the main all-powerful villains of the series, and possibly behind the Flux as well. So looking further through the story, we get all the stuff with Carvinista turning up on Earth, taking Dan. I do quite like the Carvinista. I've seen people having mixed opinions on him. I get that he's quite comedic, but I think that's kind of the point. When you've got all these very serious villains, you've got the Weeping Angels, you've got Swarm, you've got the Sontarans. I feel like you almost need a slightly more comedic villain, but then ultimately he's not really the villain, is he? He's not really a bad character. He's just trying to look after his assigned human that he's in charge of, basically. And I love that idea. I have to say, I think that's such a clever idea to slot into the story. And so yeah, I don't hate Carvinista at all. He does, unfortunately, I think the voice maybe just reminds me of the Absorbaloff a bit, which is probably not ideal, but I just really enjoyed the performance of Carvinista. I feel like some of the jokes about his mother and just the jokes that they make about the fact he's a dog and things, it obviously it lends itself to it. It's an easy joke to make, but I just think they were fun. I enjoyed it. I thought that was just a fun moments in the story. I don't see why that was worthy of any real criticism there. So yes, once Dan's been zapped off from Earth, we then get the Doctor and Yaz arriving on Earth outside Anfield, making some bizarre footballing reference about Liverpool Football Club, because why not? Apparently the Doctor's a Liverpool fan, and in the Klopp era, who knows? I'm sure that offended somebody who was a Manchester United fan. But there we go. And then obviously the house gets blown up or imploded, and then we mysteriously meet this character called Claire, who has seemingly met the Doctor before. So she's from the Doctor's future in some form, but obviously it's also set in the present day. And then we obviously see the Weeping Angels for the first time, or a singular Weeping Angel who saps Claire back into the past. Now, Claire is an interesting character. She mentions about going home the long way round, which was also... or going the long way home, which is probably nothing, but obviously the long way round has a good history in New Who of relating to the Doctor and Gallifrey and the likes. Maybe it'll be nothing, but I don't know. It just was quite interesting, I thought. And the fact that she's met the Doctor before as well is always it's just one of those fun things I love with playing with time and how timelines don't always match up on things. I know that's kind of what we did with River Song, but I feel like they don't in general do that enough in Doctor Who. And so I'm kind of looking forward to the fact that we've got that sort of thing happening in this series. I do think that, she's going to turn up again. Obviously, this character of Claire will probably, in the future, at some point down the line in the series, maybe it will be the Weeping Angel episode in episode 4, which I believe is going to be episode 4, is going to be the Weeping Angel focused story. Whether that's when we'll kind of get the backstory and the understanding of the Doctor from the Doctor's point of view, then she'll have seen Claire in the Doctor's past, but Claire's future, and then it'll meet a younger version of Claire. It's going to get confusing, like it always used to with River Song, but I think it's going to be fun, and I'm really interested to see how that plot all plays out. I must say I'm enjoying the 13th Doctor and Yaz so much more in this series than pretty much either of them before. Certainly Yaz in particular feels like she's taken a massive jump as a character. Now that she's not having her dialogue split across 3 characters with Ryan and Graham there as well, I feel like she's just got so much more of her own character. She's got so much more to do. She's got so much more confidence as well, which I think just makes her infinitely more interesting. We see her almost being like the Doctor in moments when she's trying to release Dan's character from, or release Dan from the cage on the Carvinista ship, which is just a great moment, really being able to show herself off. And it just really feels like she's ready to kind of talk back to the Doctor where they've kind of shied away from that in the past. She's not afraid of going, why do you not keep avoiding telling me the truth? Because the Doctor, it's another one of these themes throughout the episodes, the Doctor just won't tell the truth about what's actually going on. I mean, we've seen that kind of in the previous series as well. She's so, like we saw it with the whole Gallifrey Timeless Child Master stuff, she's so desperate to not tell any of them anything about it, and that seems to be a continuing theme into this, which you have to assume will maybe cause problems for the Doctor at some point down the line. So yes, plot number 8, the next plot that we've got to discuss is the story is the Vinder storyline. Him on Outpost Rose. Is that a reference to Rose Tyler? Maybe, could be, don't really know. We meet him. He seems to be some sort of, observer. He's kind of out there to kind of keep an eye on things in the universe or something like that in this observatory station. We don't really know anything about his character. We don't really know quite what's going on. Obviously, he tried to, he managed to seemingly escape the flux, I think, in his kind of escape pod thing. But it kind of was used as a framing device to kind of frame the initial, discovering the flux, basically, because we hadn't really actually seen it at any point up until that moment where Vinder's introduced and then detects it, and we start seeing it destroying planets and everything, which is just really, really cool. So yeah, I feel like Vinder, certainly with the way they've marketed it, Vinder is going to become a very important character, I think, during this series. But based on this first episode, we don't really have a lot to work with. We don't really know quite where his character is going to sit or come into play. Maybe he's a part of the division. Could be possible. Not sure. We'll have to wait and see. We also, of course, learned some interesting new info. Well, we found out more about Carvinista and who he actually was, and we learned that he's an operative for the division, and actually the Doctor's on a mission to find out more about the division, which is something that certainly wasn't, hinted at in the End of the Timeless Children or in Revolution of the Daleks. There was no real... Obviously, there was that left open question, but there wasn't any indication that's actually what she was doing. And so it's intriguing that now we find out that one of the kind of key things she wants to know about is to know more about the division, because she obviously wants to learn about her past and try and find out someone she can talk to find out her past, I guess, is the idea, because there's so much she doesn't know. And so it was really interesting to learn that Carvinista, who, is a Lupari, he's not a Time Lord or a Gallifreyan or anything like that. He's a member of the division as well. So that shows that maybe the division isn't only a Gallifreyan organisation, or maybe it is based on Gallifrey, but they sort of, employ agents from other planets and other races and things like that. I don't know, but it just opened up some more interesting questions on the division, which obviously weren't answered in this story. It gets pretty quickly cut off after being mentioned, so that we don't, give away too much too soon. But yeah, clearly that's going to be a very big focus in this series. So yes, just to wrap up the final plots we get, obviously we get introduced to the flux, the big cataclysmic event, the hurricane. I like that word. I think that's a good word to describe it, the hurricane that's raging across the universe, destroying planet after planet. I love the moment where we see inside the Doctor's kind of, the Doctor gets a projection inside, seeing the flux destroying those different planets, and just seeing randomly, we just get this shot on a random alien planet, a load of these like green aliens just getting zapped up and disintegrating. And I felt that such a, often Doctor Who wouldn't bother to do that because budget, but it's just such a great way to kind of give a sense of the destruction, the real world destruction for other planets that this is doing, that's a real race of aliens there. We might never know anything about them, know who they are or anything. It's just a green bunch of aliens, but they got destroyed by the flux. I thought that was just a great example of showing the power of the flux and how seemingly unstoppable it is. As we approach the end of the story, we also get introduced to the Sontarans. We knew they were coming in this episode at some point, and it was great to see them in all their glory. Great for them, see the costumes that just look spectacular. I felt the Sontarans were still just very slightly comedic, where they were discussing, how disgusting the one on the projection looked and things because he'd been out for so long and all of that. And then the classic little sort of shaky tongue thing they do when they're chuckling away was also just brilliant, I thought. And just classic kind of Sontaran style that there's this, Flux destroying the universe event. Let's go and join in with the war. It's going to be great fun. We love it because we're the Sontarans. It was sort of classic Sontaran stuff, and obviously going to set up what's happening next week in War of the Sontarans, the second episode. That's going to have them as the main focus of the story. I'm just really, really, it was really great to see them. It just added a little extra something to the end of this episode, I thought. And then the final couple of storylines that were kind of developed or opened up, I guess, kind of more developed. Really, this storyline was the Doctor versus Swarm, where Swarm kind of infiltrates the Doctor's mind again, transports her to whatever this sort of netherness is that they were sort of chatting in, probably just a sort of a mental universe basically, and this, what I just think is going to be such a great villain, the Swarm. Like, I love just the way, firstly, prosthetics, the costume is amazing. I love the whole design of the alien. And just the way he talks to the Doctor, this sort of exuding confidence and this sinister confidence that he's got, that, he's got all the power. We have to presume that they're behind the Flux as well and controlling the Flux, Swarm and Azure, and that they just are in so much control. And the fact that the Swarm has met the Doctor many times in the past, they fought many battles, and the Doctor's knows nothing about it. Obviously, that must mean that it's pre-Hartnell, that it's from the fugitive Doctor days, from the Division days, that he was like the great nemesis of the Doctor, kind of like the Master, but from the pre-Hartnell days is how I kind of look at it. I don't think he is the Master. I know some people thought, could think, oh, well, he's just an old incarnation of the Master. I don't think that's the case. I think it wouldn't be as interesting as him being a new character, but obviously for the Doctor, well, I guess the Doctor's history, once we learn about it, it won't be a new character. But yeah, I just thought he was brilliantly interesting, and I know he's going to be such a great threatening presence throughout the series to come. And then the final mysterious bit of plot set up that we don't have any resolution yet is the character of Diane, or Diane, who gets taken mysteriously, forced by walking into this sort of haunted house, which then transports her to some sort of lake, river thing somewhere, where both Azure and then we see Swarm as well turn up to terrorize her and have fun with her or whatever, which is bizarre. We've no clue where that's going to go, why that happened, but I think that's great. There's so many open plot threads that we've got to look forward to for later in the series. And then obviously we get what I think is a great final scene, final moment. It's a moment that is actually reminiscent for me of Broadchurch series 1 episode 1. I don't know if you've ever seen Broadchurch, but there's this right in the end of the first episode, there's a great montage showing us all the possible killers, like cutting through these sort of shots of all the different characters and whether they could be the killer of Danny in this in the plot of that story, of that series. And I just felt we got that similar sort of effect of showing obviously the destruction of the universe and then just cutting to this sort of dramatic music montage of all the different characters that we've set up in this story that are going to become a big part of the rest of the series. I just thought that was a great way to kind of remind us of everything that's been going on in the story and really showing the general threat, the desolation, the end of the universe feeling that this really brings to us, because it really did set up the highest of stakes. It did feel like the universe was ending, that there's nothing the Doctor could do. She'd thrown everything at it. She'd throw the time vortex from the TARDIS, smash the TARDIS a bit to throw the time vortex at the Flux, and it did nothing. And so she stood there completely helpless, watching the Flux about to seemingly, take over and disintegrate the TARDIS. I know, obviously, she's not going to immediately die. They're not all going to immediately die. But how the heck they're going to get out of this, I don't know. And how ultimately the Doctor's going to defeat the Flux as well, I don't have a clue. In many ways, it sort of reminded me of the Stolen Earth, with that sort of feeling of complete hopelessness that the Doctor has in the face of the end of the universe, the planets disappearing as it was then, and planets being destroyed this time round. It just gave that similar sort of feeling to the story to me, of the complete hopelessness that the Doctor is currently experiencing, and how on earth she's ultimately going to be able to get the universe back together, I guess, something like that. So that kind of works us through the story. Just a few other random thoughts, comments based on some of the notes I wrote down and things, was I really, really liked the whole idea of Carvinista being the sort of guardian of Dan, or each of the Lipari being guardians of a human, and that they, when they are aware that the universe is about to be destroyed and it's the end of the world, that they all fly in and, kidnap basically and take away all the humans and protect them in their, flux-proof ships. How the heck are they flux-proof? Don't know, but they are. Plot. plot convenient, it's fine. But yeah, I just really love that idea that actually he wasn't the enemy of the piece, really. He was the man's best friend. He's a dog, so of course he was going to be the protector of a human. I thought that was just a really fun way of explaining exactly who he was, and sort of taking away the kind of threat as a real villain, which didn't need to be there. And I do wonder how much more of a role Carvinista is going to play in this series. I kind of feel like that sort of story, that was kind of like the story for the first episode, in as much as there was a plot of the first episode. And I feel like that maybe he's pretty much done after this first episode, but I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. And so yeah, as a whole, I think I really, really enjoyed it. On first watch, it was a lot. Like, it's intense for 50 minutes. It's pretty non-stop. New things being added, high energy and high intensity, action-packed. There's stuff going on constantly. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's all about setting up the rest of the series, and it's got to do that. That's the purpose of it. And I think it does such a good job of that, of introducing all these different plot threads that are going to be explored in later episodes, of giving us such a real and present threat that is going to, ravage the universe, that's going to destroy the universe unless the Doctor somehow does something about it. But then the Flux seems to be, moving so quickly. How the heck is she going to sort this out? I just think it's so fascinating that that's all been set up. Sure, it does feel different to watching a normal Doctor Who story because it isn't a monster of the week. There isn't a resolution, really, at the end of this story. I know we don't get that in two-parters, but it doesn't feel like it's the same beginning, middle, end structure to a normal story of any sort. It very much feels like we kind of almost start in the middle and finish in the middle, and have a few beginnings in between the two middles. And then, it just leaves it open to explore where the rest of the series is going to go. I do feel like as an episode, this will kind of be looked back on. It'll be easier to look back on this once we've seen how the whole story plays out of Doctor Who Flux. And once we know where ultimately the story is going to go and how it's resolved, I think it will strongly affect sort of, what we like about it and how things are. I think that's really, really, an important part of it. So yeah, I think a lot of this series is just going to be about waiting for how things play out. But I'm certainly, based on this first episode, I think that it has a lot of potential. I think the series could be a really, really good one. And I'm really excited to see where the story goes. But guys, please do let me know your thoughts on this new episode in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought of the Halloween apocalypse. What's your theory about how any of the storylines are going to play out? As I say, there's like 12 different plots pretty much. So many of them are unresolved. How are they going to play out through the rest of this series? What are your predictions? What are you most excited for out of these different storylines and seeing where they go? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it. But guys, that's just about it for this video. Please do hit that like button and that subscribe button if you're new here. Please do subscribe for all my new videos coming up about the show. I'm hoping to do a video in more depth about the division, what we've learnt today, or what learnt from the new episode, and what we knew previously and where I think it might go with the division. Also, there will be complete soundtracks for each episode as well coming up through the rest of through the 6 weeks as well. So that's something really exciting to look forward to, and just lots of other videos that you'll be able to look forward to over the next few weeks. But apart from that, guys, as always, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new one. Goodbye.